The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
A very warm welcome to Squawk Box Europe this Monday morning. I'm Steve Sedgwick with Karen Cho and Juliana Tattelbaum, and these are your headlines. The United States enters the war between Israel and Iran, striking 3 Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend, with the US President Donald Trump now hinting at potential regime change as an objective in the Islamic Republic.
Iran's foreign ministry pledges to respond, warning of everlasting consequences, while European leaders hope to diffuse tensions and call for a return to the negotiating table.
And crude climbs, but markets remain calm despite Iran's parliament reportedly backing a measure to close the crucial Strait of Hormuz, with a final decision up to its Supreme National Security Council.
So the United States has entered the Iran-Israel war, carrying out strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan. The operation involved more than 125 US aircraft and 14 so-called bunker buster bombs, the weapon's first official use. US President Donald Trump called the operation very successful, whilst the Pentagon said the strikes had devastated Tehran's nuclear program. NBC News cannot independently verify the level of damage. Addressing the nation after the strikes, Trump warned Iran against retaliation.
This cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
Overnight, the US president appeared to call for regime change in Iran, diverging from his previous messaging from his administration. In a Truth Social post, Trump questioned why there wouldn't be a change if the current government is not able to, quote, make Iran great again. Speaking to NBC News on Sunday, Vice President J.D. Vance said the US is, quote, at war with Iran's nuclear program, not Iran, as he gave his take on what could happen next.
We have no interest in boots on the ground. The president has actually been one of the fiercest critics of 25 years of failed foreign policy in the Middle East, which is why he did what he did. A very precise, a very surgical strike tailored to an American national interest. And that national interest is Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It would be a disaster for us and for our allies in the region. So I don't fear that this is going to become a protracted conflict, because I think that we have a president who knows what's in America's interests and is willing to do the things necessary to accomplish that interest.
Iran has vowed to respond, with the country's foreign minister warning of everlasting consequences. Officials told NBC News on Sunday that the next 48 hours are of particular concern and that it is unclear whether any retaliation would target overseas or domestic locations or both. Officials also told NBC that Iran sent a private message to President Trump in recent days warning it would respond to strikes by unleashing terror attacks carried out by sleeper cells on U.S. soil. Iran's parliament has also backed closing the Strait of Hormuz, a move that requires the backing of the country's supreme leader. Speaking in Istanbul on Sunday, Iran's foreign minister brushed off calls for diplomacy.
Of course, the door for diplomacy should be always keep open, but this is not the case right now. My country has been under attack, under aggression, and we have to respond based on our legitimate right of self-defense. And we will do that as long as needed and necessary.
Let's get the latest from our point person, of course, for all matters in the Middle East. Dan, I'm just going to ask you a very generic question. You can take it wherever you like thereafter. How does it feel in the Middle East? What does the tension feel like at the moment? There will be some parties we know who are relieved that the Iranian nuclear threat is being dealt with. There will be others who are stunningly concerned about the escalation. Just give us a bit of the flavour before you go into the detail of the rest of the news flow.
Sure. Steve, remember, it's the peak summer here in the region at the moment. So in the UAE, there is an easy calm on the ground. Of course, many people who call the UAE home have gone on vacation. They're traveling for the summer. And of course, we see the population pulling back through this time of the year. But people that I've spoken to this morning obviously have a lot of questions about what could potentially happen next here. Anecdotally as well, on social media, I've been receiving plenty of messages, plenty of questions with people asking, am I safe? Is it okay to stay here? What is happening around the region at the moment? And why is this happening as well? So lots of unanswered questions at this point. And of course, the region basically on edge, watching and waiting to see what happens next. But it's also fair to say this US strike on Iran's nuclear infrastructure really marks a turning point, and the entire region is now bracing for what could come next. This was the most direct US military action against Iran in recent memory, and the decision to use these bunker buster bombs to hit 3 key Iranian nuclear sites is a big escalation in this decades-long standoff. Now, Washington insists this was a tactical operation to degrade Iran's nuclear program. And of course, in response, Tehran has warned of everlasting consequences. We've learnt in the last few hours that they are now coordinating with the Russians on their positions. And of course, as it stands right now, the Strait of Hormuz, which is an artery for 20% of the world's oil, is on high alert. Any Iranian attempt to disrupt shipping in the strait, whether through drone attacks or naval mines or swarm tactics, as we've seen in the past, of course now risks triggering a broader military response and descending global energy markets into chaos. So again, the question in the region right now is what could potentially happen next here? I think it's fair to say, just given the state of Iran's economy, the state of its leadership, and where the country stands today, its ability to actually push back here on a conventional level has been significantly degraded by Israel over the last couple of years. We've seen Israeli strikes being very effective in decapitating the Iranian proxies operating in Lebanon, for example, but also more broadly in Iraq and in Syria as well. And as a result, analysts that we've been speaking to today say the risk of an asymmetric retaliation remains high. But at the same time, Iran may also be considering its options when it comes to a diplomatic off-ramp here as well. What that diplomatic off-ramp looks like remains to be seen, because the options here are also narrowing. Vice President J.D. Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also made clear in the last few hours that the US position is not to pursue regime change, but at the same time, we've seen a lot of mixed messages coming out of the United States as well, with President Donald Trump also taking to truth just a short time ago, floating the idea, the possibility of regime change in Iran as well. So on the one hand, it seems like the Vice President and the Defense Secretary are seeking to de-escalate, the President keeping all options on the table here as well. So Iran's response, which is being closely watched, if it eventuates, and how restrained or how reckless it may be, will ultimately determine whether this becomes a contained flashpoint now or the start of something far more dangerous. And of course, that is what we're watching out for next. Risk assets also responding in a very muted way here, which I think is perhaps giving us an indication as to exactly how traders feel about where this is going. You've seen oil prices haven't necessarily spiked to the extent that we saw during the first Israeli strikes. And at the same time as well, risk assets across Asia in the trading day today also selling off, but not very significantly off the back of this. So an easy calm in the region, also an easy calm in the markets, and all eyes on what exactly Iran does next.
Dan, can I just circle back to the crux of the story for me right now, which is what damage was done to Iran's nuclear program? Because it feels as though this has been what the Americans and the Israelis have been trying to target, stopping Iran in its tracks in terms of posing any threat. What do we know in terms of the direct hits? We've seen holes in the ground, but no way to verify exactly what the strikes did in Iran.
That's exactly right, Karen, and this is a really important question at this point. The administration in the immediate aftermath of the attack declared total victory here. The word that President Donald Trump used was obliterated. He said that these 3 sites will no longer ever be able to enrich uranium, and they had effectively been eliminated. Of course, we don't know that at this point. NBC News sources and our own sources unable to independently verify exactly what damage has been done here. If it is the case that this is only superficial damage, then clearly the US efforts here have not been achieved. But if it is the case that indeed these facilities have been destroyed, then that would mark the not just best case scenario for the United States and for the president, but also for Israel, which we understand had also been conducting operations to take out facilities on the ground in order to pave the way for this American strike to occur. So exactly what the damage on the ground inside Iran is at this point is still unclear. Whether or not we actually ever see that US intelligence is also unclear at this point, and pressure has been rising on the administration to provide more information, particularly from Democrats on the other side of the aisle here, who are clearly concerned about the legality of these strikes and the fact that Congress was also not informed. So we're likely to get more information in the coming hours and days, but the full extent of the damage on the ground still a big question mark at this point and largely unknown.
Dan, we'll revisit, of course, your coverage a little bit later on, but thank you for being so comprehensive. Right, let's get to Kaylin Birch, who's chief economist at the EIU. Kaylin, many scenarios now. I guess the one that you're looking at the most is the reaction out of Tehran. I keep hearing the Iranians have got no good options, but they have got a lot of options to disrupt the world economy and indeed inflict damage on US targets, haven't they?
They do. They have a lot of options. Unfortunately for Iran, they will all have negative blowback for their own economy or political stability as well. So it's kind of choosing your way through the quagmire, if you will. I think we could see, just to think about 2 potential scenarios. One is the low intensity retaliation. Iran will want to retaliate. I can't imagine really that Iran will come back to the negotiating table without having some sort of symbolic response to this really kind of fundamental attack that they've at the receiving end of. If they were to target an asymmetric sort of attack, as you've been speaking about, or if we were to see some attacks from Iranian-backed proxies in the region, who they don't control outright, but we could potentially see that kind of happening, through the side door. The Houthis in Yemen, for example, could target shipping lanes in the Red Sea, or the Strait of Hormuz, of course, is something on the table. That would be something that would send a message, but not necessarily derail kind of the track with the global economy that we've seen so far. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken, who could not have seen that extraordinary interchange between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, some of the most extraordinary rounds of questioning I've seen. Do you think the US political establishment is on board with this, or actually is horrified at the fact that the US, now we have to be very careful what language you use, is not in the war, hasn't declared war, but has perhaps joined the side of the Israelis in this war as well? The line is that the US is very good at starting wars, but not so good at ending them as well. Are you very concerned about what happens next from a US point of view?
Absolutely. And I think the different factions of the US policy environment will also be concerned. The kind of traditional MAGA, if you will, America first, have no obligation on the global stage. These components of Mr. Trump's base will be very much wanting a reassurance that the US has no long-term stake in this fight. But we have seen the more hawkish voices come into the ascendant recently, kind of preceding this attack, and being a lot more vocal on the stage. And I'd caution to say that the Trump administration is not isolationist. It has conflicting strains of isolationism and interventionism. And we're seeing that interventionism take the kind of upper hand at the moment. Now, ultimately, I think Trump would like to extricate himself after this one overwhelming show of force. But the next few days will tell if that is going to be possible.
Kaylin, good morning. It's Juliana here. Let me shift you back to the Iranian side of things here and ask you who can come to Iran's side here and aid Iran in its response. Obviously, it's got close ties with Russia. Iran has been helping President Putin in terms of weapons in its fight against Ukraine. We know that the Iranians are going to be speaking to the Russians this week. But what exactly could Putin offer here? And if not Russia, does Iran have anybody else on its side?
I think ultimately Iran needs a response that inflicts kind of an answer from the US and its allies, but it doesn't fully escalate. Because again, Iran is in a uniquely kind of dangerous position here, with the regime going to be trying to hold on and just stay in place. So anything too strong in terms of reaction, and I would quantify that in terms of a clear Russian involvement would be an escalation the US would consider, I think. In terms of its response, and would send us again onto a more escalatory track. So perhaps quiet support, one that doesn't kind of show that Iran is forming a group of allies there, would be something that would be an option. I think here we have to think about proxies as well, because again, this is an arm that Iran has relied on to be active in the region previously, and we could see more of that. It wouldn't necessarily be seen as a widening of the conflict, which Russia might.
Kaylin, let me piece this together for the impact on the world economy, because so far we've got a somewhat nuanced reaction, and that's from the likes of Goldman Sachs as well, expecting some sort of supply shock risk that has risen, but not talking about a state of affairs yet that there's a strong oil price problem for the world economy. We've got central banks last week that were looking at weakening growth and lower inflation, enough so they felt the need to cut rates. What are we talking about here? If the uncertainty is prolonged and we've got an oil price that is higher for longer, what is that going to do to really challenge economies globally?
Well, we have, as you just said, we've seen all of the measures that we'd be looking at jumping up. So oil prices have soared. They came back a little bit from their immediate knee-jerk reaction, which is encouraging. It suggests that we're in a sort of a wait to see what happens rather than an escalatory trend for prices that's going to show no sign of abating. That was a bit that I took from the news this morning. That was a bit encouraging. But everything has moved from a very low baseline, which sort of mutes the degree of change that we've seen. So the US dollar strengthened, not massively, but just enough off of its low base to suggest that we are really heading into a more risk-averse scenario. Oil prices are up, not massively. We're only at $80 a barrel when they were at their peak earlier this morning. We have to remember that's from quite a soft base over the course of the last couple of weeks, when the global economy was more concerned about rising trade barriers from the US, shifting the US and global economies into a slower growth momentum, and was weighing on all of those assets. So we've seen a relatively muted response, but we have to remember that was from recession fear territory. So it's still quite a strong reaction, and we could see more of that room to run today, tomorrow, and in the following days.
Kaylin, really appreciate your analysis as always. Kaylin Birch, Chief Economist at the EIU. Coming up on the show, the UK government prepares to reveal its industrial strategy, with AI investment set to be a key focus. Plus, we continue our coverage of rising tensions in the Middle East after U.S. strikes on Iran, bringing you the reaction from leaders here in Europe. And we'll dig into the latest moves in the oil market with Energy Aspects founder Amrita Sen. That's at 7:30 London time. Welcome back to the program. Prosus posted full-year core earnings of $7.4 billion, up 47% on the year, and ahead of the company's financial targets. Revenue in the company's e-commerce segment grew 21%. Well, we are very fortunate to have Fabrizio Biosi with us now, the CEO of Prosus. Thank you so much, Fabrizio, for joining us in the studio.
Pleasure to come back here. Good morning.
Well, I think given the news flow this morning, it's refreshing to have a piece of good news to talk about this morning in the form of your results. Pros is swinging to a profit after some pretty big strategic changes that you've made since coming to the helm. Just talk us through the numbers today and what's been going right in terms of the new strategic changes.
Perfect. Very happy to share some good news today or this week. I'm completing 1 year as CEO of Prosus. And we have many good news. Our EBIT is increasing by 12 times to $440 million. So we are quite excited about that. Our board just approved a 100% increase in our dividends. We are growing 21%. So I'm quite excited about the numbers we are releasing today. And we are just getting started, so much more ahead.
You talk about just getting started and much more ahead, and I know earlier this year you were talking up the opportunity in Europe specifically. Obviously, Prosus has made a lot of its money on your investments in Chinese tech via Tencent. What are the big themes and segments that you see as most compelling in Europe right now? And I guess second part to the question, what do you think of valuations in Europe? Are they attractive or are they prohibitive?
You talked about our Chinese investment. That was the big story about Prosus in the last 10 years, but that's what we are changing. Prosus outside Tencent is growing a lot of profitability. Now we are cash flow positive outside Tencent, and it's going to increase 10 times. We are quite excited about the growth we are going to have outside China. My big priority is invest in Europe. I had $18 billion last time I came here. We spent $6 billion in the last 6 months, so it's a good start. We made a $2 billion acquisition in Latin America that was completed, and we made a $4.5 billion acquisition in Europe in Just Eat Takeaway, and that's what we are looking for. Europe, for the last 10 years, have not created big tech here, and this is a big opportunity. I think Europe requires much more investment, requires companies that think big and build real AI technology innovation here in Europe. That's what we are doing. We are creating an AI center in Amsterdam. We are acquiring Just Eat to create a very big tech here in Europe. And I think it's completely possible. We need to invest more, and the Prosus is ready to do that.
Let's get into the takeout platforms, because there was a ton of news flow last month. Your formal offer for Just Eat Takeaway. We saw rival Deliveroo also agreeing a takeover with the US rival DoorDash. So clearly consolidation coming into the sector. Helicopter view, what does that consolidation mean for profitability in the sector?
I think Europe for many years had many smaller companies. If you look to the leader companies in the US, they are $100 billion company. The leader company in China is a $100 billion company. Europe has a few smaller companies. It's time to change that. And what we think is we need to have an European global leader. That's what Prosus is trying to do. So the Just Eat Takeaway is our first big step, and we want to create a really big tech company with Just Eat Takeaway in the center, with AI in the center. So we saw other companies that are moving too, but we are not afraid. We want to invest more. We still have $11 billion to invest, and we are going to use it. Food
delivery seems to be part of a whole super app proposition. Yes. We've seen it in many different places. I was on the stage with Tencent the other day, and they're talking about building a super app on the continent of Africa using Orange as a partner. Yes. What do you see in terms of competition against, say, Tencent and other markets when you try to build super apps? You're going to be against a company that was actually very fundamental to your growth story originally.
We are not against Tencent. Actually, we are very happy with Tencent. We are very happy Tencent shareholders. We still have almost a fourth of Tencent, so we are very happy Tencent shareholder. But our story is what we can build in the rest of the world. And that's what we are doing. We are starting in Europe, but I don't know if you remember, we are a big investor in Latin America. I'm from Brazil. We bought Despegar there. We have iFood, a very big food delivery business in Brazil, very, very big. Now we have Despegar, Simpla, travel company, events company, payments company. So what we are building in Brazil, an e-commerce company, all of that in Brazil, that's our thesis. We can replicate what Tencent did in China with local technology, local people in Latin America, and we are already doing that. Now we are going to do it in India and in Europe, and I'm very excited that next time, 2 years birthday when I come here, I'm going to tell you that it's all becoming reality.
Nice to see you. Let me challenge you a little bit on some of these growth areas, as you know is my want. They're going ex-growth, aren't they? A lot of these takeaway companies, a lot of these delivery companies. I look at the first quarter results over at Just Eat Takeaway, the one you've just taken out for €4 billion as well. And I look at the GTV values, and they're moving in the wrong direction as well. Plus, I look at the targeted EBITDA, EV margins as well, and they look skinny to me compared, and that's EBITDA as well. That's before real money and real profit.
Yes, I'll tell you good news because today is day for the good news. We have a big operation very similar to Just Eat Takeaway in Latin America called iFood.
Yeah.
And the growth is more than 30%. The margin is quite healthy.
What is the margin?
We are making it public today, but it's best in class in the world. I don't remember exactly what's the
Okay.
number, but it's best in class in the world. So
But the barriers to entry for these businesses are zero.
No, if you are doing a bad job, if you are doing a very good job, you are using innovation and AI. We have a capital markets days in 2 days. We are going to talk about how we are doing global class innovation in Brazil, where we are using AI, we are using voice, we are using large commerce model.
That's great, and I love it.
That's
but
more than great, and that's what we are doing in
what
Latin
about the
America.
profitability, Fabrizio?
It's very high in Latin America.
But it's not in Europe.
No, that's why we are acquiring Just Eat Takeaway, and I look forward to invite me here in 6 months, and I'm going to tell you how profitability is increasing a lot here in Europe. I'm very confident because we did it in Latin America, and I'm sure it can be done in Europe. But we need much more innovation and much more investment. To be fair with you, this is missing in Europe, and I'm very happy we can invest to turn it around.
What more innovation do you need? It's an app. You have restaurants. You have guys on motorbikes. I mean, it's kind of pretty basic stuff, isn't it?
Oh my God! I forgive you after saying these absurd things. It's
Sorry,
not
it's blokes and ladies on motorbikes. There you go. Sorry. Am I right now?
Absurd. What we have is thousands of people doing amazing first-class innovation. You need to have, we have 800 models running 4 million deliveries per day. You need a lot of technology to do it at the price and the speed that customers want. So I'm very confident we are doing that in Latin America and India, and I'm even more confident that Europe is going to lead that in the world.
What else do you want to add to the app? Because typically when we're talking about super apps back in the day, it was cars, for instance, mobility. Is that part of the mix down the track? Do you see consolidation on mobility?
Yes, we just made a big announcement in Latin America where we are partnered with Uber. So we are offering rides using Uber. But in Brazil, we are offering food delivery and travel and events and e-commerce and pharmacy and grocery, and we have more than 66 million customers buying from iFood.
But Uber wants to be in that space. This is where I'm confused because Uber wanted to be the super app. So where does that leave you when you're up against a competitor that wants to do exactly the same thing?
Yeah, in Latin America, we decided to partner, so we offer everything but mobility, and they are going to offer mobility but not to offer food delivery. So we made a strategic partnership to offer the super app benefit to our customers. We have together tens of millions of customers, and that's what we're going to do together there.